Hey, Lashpreneurs. Oh, we're going to get into some math today, but don't worry, I've got a special tool that I'm going to refer you to that will avoid you having to do any of the math. But we are going to get into some numbers today. So I hope your brain's ready for some number crunching, because specifically we're going to talk today about, is it really expensive to hire a team? Right? A lot of people, I took a poll on Instagram stories, and a lot of people were wanting to hire a team, but they thought it's too expensive. At least here in the US, why people avoid building out teams and just going like the 1099 independent contractor route, which we've done plenty of episodes. It's not really a legal classification here in the US, but they pay the 50% commission. And usually what ends up happening in that scenario is that you get people who are team members, quote unquote, that are only loyal to the discount or the amount that you can pay them for money, right? At a 50% commission rate, and I'll get into the math on that today, and you can go in and plug in some numbers yourself because I created a calculator for you. You can look at why a 50% commission model is not profitable for your business. We're going to go through why that is that way, and how typically I teach people to build out teams is on a lower hourly rate with paid training, performance-based incentives, so that the team member is really empowered to control their own income, and you're no longer the gatekeeper to their income goals, and you actually become the person that removes the obstacles and helps support them, cheer them on, train them, do whatever to help them grow the business so that they then grow their income, right? So I do take this approach of all rising tides lift all ships. So when you're trying to build out a team, ideally, most of you are in a place where you're wanting to outsource the revenue generating activities of the business, like the services, so that you can pull back on stopping to trade your time for money to then spend working on the business and not have your time tied to the amount of money that the business can make, because your time is finite, right? And most of you that are in the realm of wanting to hire probably have very little time available to be able to grow your business or train other people or make more money because you're time capped. So this episode really is going to talk through the expense of hiring a team. It's not actually as expensive as you would think. But even if you're just hiring curious, this would be a great episode for you to listen to kind of plant the seed of where you might want to go in the future. I used to be very against people hiring and just being like, don't do it, because I feel like most people don't actually want what it takes to build out a team. They want the result, but they don't actually want to do the work up to that. Since working with coaching clients one-on-one over the past couple of years and helping them build out teams, also the evolution of how I lead and manage and hire and fire my team members, and how we look at all the data and the financial side of things, I really do see that it was a lack of education that's available in our industry to help build out a profitable team, right? Because it's done so wrong and so illegally and so expensive in our industry that, yeah, it would not get you the result that you want. But I have now proof of several clients, mastermind members, and this new program that we're releasing called Society X, where we have proof that there is that possibility of getting that profitable business where the owner can step back and stop trading their time for services, still have a great income, a growing income, and be able to really focus on growing the business rather than working in it. So if you are watching this somewhere, you're going to see visually what this calculator is. If you're listening to this as the podcast episode, when you get a chance, I want you to go to the lashpreneur.com/hire calculator, HIRE calculator, and walk along with me as I walk you through what this calculator is sharing. And again, you can always go back to this episode and re-listen, rewatch, because it is going to be a little mathy. So it is a little bit more of a visual episode than it is kind of listening. But even listening, you're going to get a lot of tips and tricks and kind of things to consider. All right, so what is my break-even cost on a new team member is what we're going to be walking through today. So this calculator is going to help you determine how many services your new team member needs to do in a week for you to break even on your payroll costs. So those of you that are listening outside of the US, I don't know what your payroll and labor standards are in your country. That is something that you're going to have to either ask a friend who has a team, or Google search, or contact some sort of government agency that works with small businesses to understand your legal obligations as far as any sort of fees or expenses that you may have tied to building out employees. So in the context of the US, we have two different categories of how people are labeled One is a W-2 employee. That is somebody who is officially an employee of the business. When somebody says building a team or my team member, they are talking about employees, or at least they should be. Then we also have a 1099 or an independent contractor designation. Here in the US, that's essentially somebody who is their own business, who's renting space from the primary business owner. It is not a very scalable business model because essentially they're just helping pay a portion of your rent, or maybe even over your rent just a little bit. But that person is completely and should be independent of the business. So as their sales grow, the primary business's sales shouldn't grow because they shouldn't be dependent on each other. That's usually a big sign that they're actually misclassified and should be an employee. Whereas when you hire an employee, sure, it may be a little bit more expensive than an independent contractor because an independent contractor is actually paying you rent. With a team member, you can actually create a scalable business model where once you hire one team member to turn profit and you have the template to do that, you can copy and paste that till you max out your space essentially, and you have a scalable income, meaning that you have a process that works, that produces profit in the business, and you just keep doing that and over and over. That's how franchises work. That's how you get to multiple locations, is that you just keep hiring these team members. And, you know, obviously it's not, that's an oversimplified version. But I want to give you an idea of the expense involved with hiring a team member, because we always want to be looking at expenses in our business as investments. When you have personal expenses and you pay money to something, there's not usually something that comes back in return that you can then grow into more money. Usually it's like you buy groceries and now you can feed yourself. So it's kind of more of a true cost or an expense. Whereas when we spend money in our business, we should be doing so with the intention that it should somehow be able to tie back to business growth in some capacity. We're getting a return on our investment. So money goes into the business and we want to return back out of the business, if that makes sense. So when we're talking about hiring a team member, that's essentially what we're doing. Either we are buying our time back by paying a team member, and now we don't have to be providing as many services, so we get time back, and or we are paying a team member and they are now producing sales and profit, and we don't have to be a part of that anymore as far as like actually being the one who's trading their time for money. So getting into this calculator, we first want to start off with the service that your new team member will be doing the most of. Now, I know a lot of you offer different services. A lot of you offer a variety of services. You offer, you know, maybe you do brows and lashes and skincare, and you're just a jack of all trades, Jill of all trades. And I have my own opinions on why that's not necessarily the most effective business approach, but let's just go with it. But when you hire a team member, chances are there's going to be probably one service that they're going to be doing the most of, at least in the first 6 months, maybe a little bit less. So for the purposes of this episode, because y'all lash artists are my peeps, we're going to be talking about a classic fill, kind of a 1 to 3 week fill, just however you want to label it, just your basic hour-long classic fill. If you're doing facials, it's probably just depending on your target market, maybe a hydrating facial. Just what kind of facials are the most common that you find yourself doing the most of, that you've already built demand for in your business, that you have so much demand that you need a team member that you can start training to do those services. Or even, you know, if we're talking facials, if you're the only person doing peels, but you can train your team member to do hydrating facials, pampering facials, relaxation facials, even just like mild peels, not the heavy peels. Great. Focus in on that. If for whatever reason you're like, if you're a waxer, probably Brazilians would be probably the service that you would base it off. Just pick a service that you do the most of, that you would hire this team member on and train her to do. Doesn't mean you can't train her on other things, but we're going to be conservative in our estimates, because I'd rather you overestimate how much it's going to cost and then have it cost less than we underestimated the investment into a team member and now we're short. So for that, in this example, you're going to want to input the price of the lowest price service this team member will be doing kind of right off the bat. Okay. So for this example, I'm going to say a classic 1 to 2 week fill is $50. In the next section of the calculator, you're going to want to input the service time based on minutes. So if an hour-long fill, classic fill, is 60 minutes, I'm going to plug in 60 into the calculator. If you're doing Brazilians, maybe it's 20 minutes and you put 20 in there. If you're doing what are some of a facial, maybe it's 75 minutes or 90 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever. Just plug in the minutes. What that helps us do is determine, because not every service is an hour, right? And so we're paying them hourly, right? We pay them per hour. That is the way that I teach it. That is the way that I recommend going. And I can get into that in another episode, why I prefer hourly over commission. Actually, we may touch on that today, but we have to kind of get a common denominator. So if you have a 20-minute service of a Brazilian, but yet we pay her an hourly rate, this calculator will compensate for that of how many services she can do in an hour. So that's why we plug in the time. All right, the next section of this calculator is their hourly rates. So depending on where you are, you may have minimum wage requirements, in which case you need to make sure that it's at least that, if not higher. I tend to go on the lower hourly rate, but plug in whatever you want to test out. You can always go back and adjust these numbers and just play with them to see which hourly rate nets you the most profit. So if we're talking commission, you can still find out an hourly rate. So if the service is, our example of that $58 an hour service, and you pay a 30% commission, well, 30% of the $50 is $15. So in an hour, she would get $15. That would be her commission from that service. So you can just plug in 15 if you're trying to figure out the hourly rate, but figure out what the service sales would be in the hour and what your commission is, and that can give you an hourly rate. But again, you can play with these numbers, go up, go down. For the example of this episode, I'm going to use a $10 an hour hourly rate. Now, some of you here in the US, that's not even minimum wage, so you need to be way higher. But for this example, that's the default number that's in there. But again, you can go in and edit this. Next step will be your hours per week. So how many hours do you want them to work a week? So full-time, I think, is around 30 to 40 hours, just depending. Anything less than that is part-time. With your first team member, I recommend starting off part-time for a couple of different reasons, but the primary one being you still have to train them. And somebody sitting around for any period of time in their first few weeks unattended because you're in the middle of a treatment room is not the most effective use of time. So you trying to block out 40 hours to train them and then you to handle your clients, that's a lot of time. So I recommend starting off with a part-time team member, but do you. So the hours that I'm going to put on here are 20. Now, something to consider that I want you to be thinking about is that when we have commission-based pay, that team member doesn't make money necessarily if there's no clients in there. So oftentimes what happens on the business owner side and on the team member side is that when they don't have anybody on their schedule, they just don't come in, or they come in for that one client and then they leave. That's really hard to provide consistent income for that team member. So they have to have another job. They are not reliant on you to be able to provide their income. You may think that sounds great, but your goal is to have a revenue producing team member. And it's hard to do that if they can't take walk-ins, if you don't know when you can schedule them, if they're in and out, coming and going, and there's just no consistency. They don't show up like it's a job. They show up like they're just, okay, here's my 20 bucks. I come in and then I leave and I don't actually contribute to the growth of the business. So what this whole calculator is planning on doing is if you're going to hire them for $10 an hour, 20 hours a week, that is their shift and they are there for that entire duration. Right now, part of your responsibility as the business owner is to make sure especially during their onboarding phase, kind of the first 3 months of employment, that they have something to do, that they're learning and getting trained and they're shadowing you and they're doing side work and they're learning all about your business and the different skill sets they need. That's your job during the first 90 days is to make sure that during those 20 hours, they may not be with a client right off the bat because they're still learning the skill set, and that's okay. But they should be progressing in their skill set over time because they're there to work. And you are compensating them for the work that they are doing, whether it's revenue generating or not. This creates a lot of stability for your team member, even though their pay not maybe super high hourly. It's setting them up for success that when they are out of their onboarding, that they can have the ability to produce their own income by way of the sales that they generate. But you want to calculate, if you want a stable and growing business and you want a team that's motivated, a stable and growing business means that they're there for a chunk of time. Right. And then we can work on the numbers and the marketing and all that to make sure that they are revenue producing, that we have clients coming in, models coming in, so they're getting practice on actual humans, all that stuff. So keep in mind, with a commission-based model, you're going to be, they're not going to want to come in. They're also going to have a hard time planning their personal life. So they may think, oh, next week on Monday, I don't look like that. I'm that busy. So I'm just going to block myself off and I'm just going to go have lunch with my girlfriends instead of you having a team member there ready and available, so that when you run Google ads, kind of the type of people that come in from Google ads tend to be people who want same day appointments or next day appointments. And you need to have a team member there to supply that demand. All right, next is calculating for downtime. Again, I want to be extra conservative in our calculations. And so it is likely there's going to be downtime, especially to a new team member, meaning there's turnover time between appointments that we need to account for, right? So if it's a 60-minute service, well, maybe there's 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever, in between services for them to turn over the room, to be able to check a client out, welcome a new client, all that. So we need to account for kind of turnover. There's also paid breaks oftentimes. Here in the US, I think for every 5 hours of work, they get one paid 15-minute break. And then they also need a lunch, which is not paid. So you don't have to worry about calculating for that, but paid breaks. Last minute cancellations happen at any level, no matter how booked somebody is, that, you know, somebody calls in sick or whatever, and we may not be able to charge that person's card. And so if there's a last minute cancellation and we can't fill that gap, that team member's still there. We're still paying them hourly, but we're not generating sales during that time. So we want to calculate for some downtime, so that we, again, are being over conservative in our estimates of how much it costs for a team member. So in this example, I'm putting 30% of their 20 hours is downtime, right? Now, when they're first starting out, that first month you have them, you may take a loss, but I want you to think big picture, that you may take a loss in the first month, maybe even the second month, you might break even on the third month, but after that, you're then scaling and growing. So if we don't look at it as such a finite period of time of like each month I need to be profitable, but we look at the year overall, we look at that return on investment, maybe I take a loss the first month I hire someone, maybe I'm breaking even the next 2 months, but from months 3 through 12 for the remainder of the year, I'm growing my profit. It will more than make up for the loss that I took in the first month or two. Right. So just kind of being aware of it and not having such blinders on that you're only looking month to month, because what you're doing is you're investing in a team member who that will then be revenue producing, hopefully for a very long period of time. So in order to, in this calculator, you're going to want to put a decimal point before your percentage of downtime. So if you're going to do 30%, it's 0.30. That way it calculates it as a percentage. You could do up to 40% as well. Just again, throw in a number. We can always go in and change these. The last thing I have in here is the payroll tax rate. So again, if you're US based, this applies to you. If you're not US based, you can plug in whatever your own payroll tax rate is, or just leave it as 0, just depending on your country, state, province's employment laws. But here in the US, the employer splits the payroll taxes with the employee. So essentially, the employer is responsible for paying 6.2% for Social Security taxes on behalf of the employee, and 1.45% Medicare taxes on behalf of the employee. The employee will have taxes taken out of their payroll on their behalf for that. That's on them to pay. But your responsibility as the employer is to pay essentially 7.65% for payroll taxes. So maybe at $10 an hour and 20 hours a week, it's $200 in payroll that we would pay them, but we have to add on the payroll tax on top of that. So you will owe 7.65% of $200 on top of the $200 that they would earn. If they have tips, you will have the payroll taxes on their tips as well, because that's part of their income. And again, that's the benefit of having an employer. Instead of being self-employed, as self-employed, you owe everything. You owe 15.3% in taxes, whereas the employee and the employer, when you're employed, split those. So again, not anything to worry about. We're going to figure out the calculations and we're going to account for all of that. So no need to get intimidated. I can definitely walk you through this inside of our program for you to understand payroll taxes, but a lot of it in these payroll softwares, it's automated and it's done for you. I don't think I've ever gone into the state's website to pay payroll taxes, or the government's site. My payroll software does all of that. So there's a lot of automation and back-end stuff, but I just want you to know that's where the money is going. All right, so all of that is going to lead you to 2 different numbers. And these numbers are going to be really important for you to evaluate how much it would cost you, and is it reasonable, is it not reasonable, what numbers are expected, what is a good profit producing team member. So let's get into that. The first number that this calculator is going to output is your total weekly wage cash requirement. This is the amount of money you need to have in the bank to run payroll for that week. So yes, payrolls are run, every other week, bi-weekly, whatever. We're making the math simple. So this is what it would be in a week if we hired a team member for 20 hours a week at $10 an hour. Essentially what this example is giving you is that it would be $480 a week to run payroll. Like that would cover all of your payroll costs, including their wage, including taxes, everything. So $480 is that chunk of money. Now, some of y'all just went, what? That's a lot of money. Work with me here. we're trying to get to at the end of this is the average number of services. Remember that classic bill that we're calculating for, to really know, is it a lot or is it not a lot? Because again, at the point that you're probably trying to hire, you may do $480 a day. I don't know. But for you to break even in this calculation, that team member would need to do 8 classic fills a week in order for you to break even on that $480 of services. So essentially, if she did 8 classic fills at $50, you would be breaking even. The money she generated, the sales that came in from the business because of her services, then paid for her payroll expenses and her income. So at that point, we're breaking even on the investment into the team member. Anything she does beyond that can cover operating expenses, can cover taxes, and most importantly, can be profit for the business. Now, based on the results that I've worked this calculation through with a lot of my mastermind members and Society Accelerator members, that's a new program we're launching based on some people I've worked with. If you are in a 3 to 5 number of services per week to break even, you have a great profit producing team member. I want you guys to go into this calculator and play with the numbers and see what it would take for you to get this number down to between a 3 and a 5, meaning that in this example, she would only need to do 3 to 5, max 5 services, classic fills a week for you to break even. That's a great profit margin. Again, consider that, if it's an hour-long service and she only needs to do 8 of them, that's 8 hours, and we have her scheduled for 20, right? So her only producing for those 8 hours in this original example, but she's got 20 hours available. Well, now we can start booking her up more. So the first goal would be to get her to where she's taking classic fill clients at least 8 hours a week. And then everything she does beyond that is then contributing to the rest of the money in the business, profit, taxes, expenses, all of that. But I would love to see y'all in the 3 to 5 range, meaning that she only needs to do 5 clients a week for you to break even on your investment into her income and payroll taxes. So that would look like if she's working 20 hours a week, so maybe she's working 4 days a week, 5 hours a day, she only needs to take what, 1.5, less than 1.5, an average of 1 client a day. That's pretty doable, right? Most of y'all have more overflow at this point that you could definitely hand over to her for her to do 4 services or 5 services a week. So if your numbers are beyond, if that average number of services per week to break even is above a 6, a 7, 8, or beyond, then we are not exactly in the place of producing profit with that team member. Therefore, we can go back and look at our numbers and play with them a little bit to see what might be the thing that needs to be adjusted, or a combination of things. So for example, when most of you are paying 50% commission, your number is going to be 8, 9, 10, even 20, 30. It may be way higher because half of your sales are going towards labor, just her income labor, just her payroll, not even the taxes on top of it. So remember, if we're paying 50% commission, we also have that 7.65% in payroll taxes. So now it's actually much higher than 50% just to pay her. So, if we get to 57%, 57.65%, right? 50% plus the payroll taxes, we're now at 57.65% of the sale goes towards her payroll costs. Well, then most people use credit cards nowadays, and there's usually about a 3% charge on credit cards. So now add 3% to that now we're over 60% of the sale is now already accounted for her just to even deliver the sale. Then we have 40% left over from that sale to run the rest of the business. Most of y'all are not running a lean enough business where your operating expenses and your taxes are less than 40%. Therefore, at a 50% commission rate, and it takes you even 40% of that to run your business, right? We all of a sudden have no room for profit. In fact, some of y'all, when you're paying your team member so much, it actually ends up working out that every time your team member takes a paying client, the business loses money. So again, go with me on this simple math here. Let's say you're paying her 50% commission. We've got that 7.65% in taxes, and we've got the 3% credit card fee. So already we're out 60%. And let's say the rest of your operating expenses, your rent, your phone, your booking software, your linens, your whatever, everything else that it takes to run your business. Let's say it's you're running a business at 55% expenses, right? So now all of a sudden we have a 60% labor cost plus a 55% operating cost. Well, that's more than 100%, right? That's actually 100 and hold on. Oh gosh, quick math. That's actually 115%, right? So that means we actually lose 15%. We're at a loss of 15% every time that team member takes a paying client. So every time she takes a paying client, you are losing 15% of your business, which comes out of your pocket, right? That's why a lot of people in the 50% commission business model, or even 40% oftentimes, are stuck in the treatment room to keep the business open, because that business owner is making money, is generating sales to pay for the team that they are then losing money on every time. And that business owner oftentimes doesn't pay themselves because there's not enough money left over. And it's a really weird situation, but it happens all the time that the primary business owner makes less than the team that she's paying, yet she's taking all the risk. She's taking on all the expense. She's taking on all the responsibility. And those team members are not loyal to her. In fact, they bitch and complain and are entitled to think that they get 60% commission, or why would I even share half of the sales with her? She doesn't do anything. And I have to scramble to get my own clients. Why would I wait for her to send me clients and make money when she's so busy in her treatment room making herself money, when really she's in the treatment room because she's trying to make sure that payroll runs, because she ain't paying herself, right? So all of that to say, 50% commission model, not ideal. But when you're in this calculator and your break-even services are 8 or more, 6 or more, 7 more, 8 more, whatever, go in. First thing I want you to adjust is just that hourly rate and just play with that and see what it does. The second thing that you could do is look at your service times. Do you really need that full time? A lot of people haven't been super efficient with their time or haven't been standardized in your services. So you kind of give away services and give away your time because it's just your time. But when you're paying somebody, you don't want them giving away time. Right. So maybe if you're doing a classic fill in 90 minutes and it's only like a 2 to 3 week fill, maybe we bump it down to 75 and see what that does to your number. Maybe we need to increase our prices. Maybe our price point is too low for the hourly wage that we need to pay. So some of y'all need to do a price increase in order to have profit built into your prices so that you can pay a team member. And again, you can also adjust the hours per week. So again, you can go back into this calculator and manipulate the numbers to see what would give you a 3 to 5 break-even number of services. You can adjust the calculate for downtime, but that would be kind of later on in when your team member's been on for about 6 months. If you've been able to focus on marketing and building her clientele, she should get booked fairly quickly. So she wouldn't have 30% downtime. In fact, she may be down to 10% downtime or maybe even less. And the payroll tax you're going to want to leave the same if you're US based. But again, you guys go to the lashpreneur.com/hire calculator. We'll leave it in the show notes and test this out for yourself. And then shoot me a DM on Instagram if you're interested in learning how to hire your first profit producing team member or your next profit producing team member. We've got a new program launching called Society Accelerator, or Society X, as you'll hear me call it. And that really is just focused on getting you to hire your first profit producing team member in 90 days or less. So DM me #hire if you're interested in learning more about that program. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Have a good one.